Welcome to the Healing and CPTSD Show, a space dedicated to supporting complex trauma survivors through community, resources, and advocacy.
People who are traumatized, they have difficulty seeing the fullness of themselves as human beings.
100%. It's almost like it steals a part of us, right?
Yeah.
And when it happens, especially from a young age, it's like, where is it all? What would you say for the individuals in the community who are still in the trauma and still experiencing it?
Well, we're talking about adults now.
Yeah.
So give me an example. What kind of an adult? No, I don't mean would still be experiencing trauma, like somebody say in an abusive relationship?
Whether it be an abusive relationship or even, for example, there's a lot, because a lot of the people in the community are, there's a lot of abuse within the family dynamics, right? And I know for me, in order for me to personally heal, I had to remove myself because, and I think that for a lot of people, they feel like you can't leave the family structure. You're not, there's so much stigma and negativity around people who remove themselves from their family and don't talk to their parent or whatnot, where they feel stuck and staying in it like they have to.
Yeah, I understand. That's a misbelief. And let me show you why.
Yeah.
There's a chapter in the book on which is called the tragic tension between authenticity and attachment.
Oh, good. I was going to get to this. Okay.
Yeah. So attachment is the child's absolute non-negotiable need to belong to somebody, to connect with somebody. Otherwise, they can't survive.
Right.
So a baby bear cannot survive. Would be dead within a day of his life.
Right.
If it wasn't for the mother's attachment and the baby's attachment to the mother.
Right.
Same with any mammal, even little birds. So attachment is a drive that's biologically embedded in our brains. We just need to connect.
Right.
But we have another need as well. I talk about this, one of the non-negotiable needs of the child is the freedom to experience all their emotions. All their emotions.
Yeah.
Anger, pain, grief, sadness, all of them.
Yeah.
Now, if a child is being hurt, and if they listen to their pain, what would they do? They would either fight back or they would escape. But what 2-year-old is in a position to fight back or escape?
Exactly.
So what can they do? If I want to stay attached, I have to suppress myself. But if I want to express myself, I have to leave my family. And no 2-year-old or 5-year-old can do that. Therefore, when it comes to attachment versus authenticity, of being authentically myself, or attachment, the child unconsciously but inevitably chooses the attachment relationship.
Right.
Then all our lives, we are more concerned with being accepted than with being ourselves.
I feel that.
Yeah. And the whole culture feeds on it, by the way. It tells us how we should be, how we should look, and what we should wear, and all this kind, so that if you want to be accepted, you got to be this way.
Right.
So it's a toxic culture. But within the family, these people that you're talking about have a choice to make. If I can't be myself in his family, they want to choose the attachment or the authenticity. The difference is, as a child, you had no power to choose authenticity. As an adult, you either have that power or you can gain that power through the proper therapy. But it's not true that you can't. Sometimes you have to say to a family which continues to be abusive. And then I'm talking to right now to a woman in Hollywood who's actually a stunt person, and she's very well known, and she's gonna write a book about her. She's written a book about her experience, but she's facing with that dilemma of some of my family can't accept that I'm talking openly about my trauma.
Right.
So what do I choose? My authenticity, in which case my family might resent me, some of them reject me, or do I choose the attachment, in which case I stifle myself all over again?
Yeah.
Well, she's chosen authenticity. It's painful though. So if you're going to choose authenticity, you better be prepared for pain.
Mm,
But the question is, which suffering would you rather have?
mm,
The suffering of inauthenticity, of putting up with the unacceptable, or the suffering of authenticity? That means accepting that some people will just not accept you.
yeah.
It's a deep one. I can't tell anybody else what to choose. I can only tell you that when you choose inauthenticity, you're inviting illness,
Mm,
mental and physical illness.
yeah. Yeah. Going to pivot a little bit because I know
Yeah.
that we're over time already, but I do want to touch base on your perspective on what healing is. And then I'd love to touch base on the psychedelics a little bit because I know that was really powerful for you. So maybe we start off with what is healing?
So again, if we look at word origins, just as the word trauma originates in the Greek word for wound, healing originates in an Anglo-Saxon word for wholeness.
Mm,
So what happens for people like you and I when we have these early experiences, we suppress parts of ourselves, we lose touch with them.
yeah.
Healing means reconnection,
Mm,
becoming whole, integrating all these parts.
yeah.
And so healing is not always synonymous with cure.
Mm,
Sometimes people are cured but not healed. Sometimes people are healed but not cured.
mhm.
Um, but healing is this movement towards wholeness. And given that that wholeness can be mm, hidden from our sight, but it can never be lost, healing is always available.
Mm,
It's available at every moment.
it's beautiful.
So it's a question of how do we best and most effectively work towards it, and that's why the last 8 chapters of the book are about healing. So, but basically, it means coming to terms with um, recognizing what triggers me,
Mhm,
how that speaks to my early childhood, knowing that I'm an adult now, I don't have to respond that way.
mhm. Yeah.
Once I get to accept myself. So there's lots of principles to healing, but acceptance is one of them. Anger is another. You have to really get in touch with your capacity to have healthy anger to
Yeah.
protect to protect your boundaries. Um, you have to figure out where in life you are not saying a no that needs to be said. When you're taking on more stress and more responsibility for others than really is your share,
Yeah.
that's going to stress you. So you have to learn how to say no, even if that means you have to give up some attachments. Because some people, when you say no, they're going to say, "Oh, I don't know, that's not what I signed up for." Well, no, it isn't.
Yeah. Sometimes
But,
it's hard to say no. There's pain that comes with saying no.
that's what I'm saying, because
Yeah.
to be authentic sometimes invites pain, and that means having to accept that pain,
Right.
which as a child you couldn't possibly,
Right.
but as an adult you can.
Yeah.
Then there's a whole lot of modalities, yours, EFT being one of them, EMDR being another, internal family systems, that's another, compassionate inquiry, which is the method that I developed, being another. There's lots out there, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
There's also community, such as you're forming, because we're communal creatures, contrary to the capitalist myth that we're competitive, aggressive, selfish,
Right.
narcissistic beings. We're actually designed to be communal and collaborative
Yeah.
and compassionate. So the community that you're building, that's another important contributor to healing. Um, so there's lots of stuff out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll jump into the psychedelics because I know that's something that has helped you with your healing. But I
Yeah.
always like to ask because I'm sure healing isn't one size fits all, right? And there's some things that benefit you and some things that don't, right? So for me, EFT was really helpful, but EMDR was really harmful for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if psychedelics is, and we can use that as the one that's helped for you, because I know you're going to dive
Yeah.
into that, but was there anything that was harmful for you that you were like, this didn't work for me? Just so we can bring that awareness that healing isn't one size fits all.
Well, so I had a therapist once who really did help me along a fair bit. I learned a lot about myself, but at a certain point I realized that he's gone as far as he can take me. But he couldn't recognize that. He needed me to stay his patient. So when I said, "Look, I ain't gonna see you anymore," he freaked out,
Oh no.
which proved how right I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if he had been at all grounded, he would have said, Congratulations
Right.
that you're strong enough now to know what you need and what you don't need.
Right.
So when I work with people, my hope is that they fire me as soon as possible, for the right reasons,
Of course.
because they don't need me anymore, So a lot of therapists, it's not so much the modality, even the MDR, I would say, I would wonder, was it the technique or was it who you were working with, and how they applied it,
Yeah.
because no technique exists on its own.
Mhm.
Every technique exists in the context of a relationship. So
Right.
maybe MDR is not, and I certainly agree, and let me say this, there's no one size fits all,
Mhm.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
But beware of any therapist who
Mhm.
doesn't know about trauma.
Mhm.
Beware of any therapist that your guts tell you is not right for you.
Yeah.
Don't stay with them because, oh, they're the expert. No, you're the expert, and
Right.
your gut feelings are going to be right.
So you would always say to listen to your gut feeling when it comes to therapy. And
Absolutely.
is there any like red flag or something where they should know, like how you were like, I just knew that I had outgrown him and what he
Yeah.
could do for me? Is there any like red flag or anything that they should look for other than just trusting their gut with it?
It's mostly that, I mean, in the absence of obvious transgressions or,
Of course.
misdeeds, your gut feelings are your best guide.
Yeah.
If you have a growing sense that this is not quite right,
Mm.
it isn't. Now, what you can do is to say that to the therapist. I have this gut feeling.
And see.
Their response will tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
You
Mm.
know, um,
Yeah.
so it's actually learning to honor ourselves. I mean, paying attention to our authentic selves, which is sort of in the beginning, it's kind of a weak little voice, but
Yeah.
the more you pay attention, the stronger it gets.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of hard, right? Especially for people who are really traumatized to understand your instinct or your gut feeling versus a
Yeah,
trauma response with it, right?
that's
And
right. But
distinguishing
but,
the
but you know what? Safety is a
two.
I mean, traumatized people to some extent have trouble. They will not feel safe people that are safe, and they will feel safe with people who are not, because
Yeah,
their safety sense get confused.
yeah,
But over time, if you're not feeling safe, don't even question why.
yeah,
Just because when you question why, then you come up with reasons.
of course.
Forget the reasons.
Yeah,
You know what? I don't have a sense of safety in this relationship,
right,
and
right.
I don't care why. I'll figure out later why.
Yeah.
But uh, if I was, if you're being chased by a tiger, you could stand there and say, I'm not feeling safe in this situation. I wonder why. Oh yeah. Is it the fact that he might eat me, or should you just climb up the next tree or run as fast, I mean, so you go with your gut feeling.
Yeah, okay, I like that. And to go on what has worked for you, you have these beautiful chapters about psychedelics.
One
Uh,
chapter.
one chapter,
Yeah,
sorry. It
that's
might have
okay.
been me watching a bunch of your interviews
Yeah.
as
No,
well about
but no,
psychedelics.
but you're right. I mentioned them in more than one chapter, but
Yeah.
I have one chapter dedicated to it, and there's a reason why I only have one chapter. There's 33 chapters in the book.
Mhm.
I'm not a psychedelic evangelist. I just mention them as something important in my life and something I think is quite promising for a lot
Yeah.
of people. But I don't think they're going to save the world
Right.
or heal all the trauma. They're
Mhm.
just a particular modality that's quite useful, so
And can help.
they can help. Yeah,
So how did it help you? Why is psychedelic awareness for trauma so important that it made a chapter in your book?
yeah. Well, because when I became familiar with them, which is about 13 years ago now,
Mhm.
I was impressed with their effect both on me, but also when I began to utilize them in my work with other people, just how powerfully it's like a lot of people will say that a psychedelic experience is like 10 years of psychotherapy. Because what the psychedelics do is they strip away this membrane between your conscious and your unconscious beings, and you actually get to see all the pain, but also all the wholeness that you're carrying inside. So, There's an example of a book who's in the book of a woman who actually had a terminal disease, or a disease that was thought to be terminal, and she was lying rigidly in her bed. She couldn't even get out of bed by herself, and now she's walking and writing an autobiography, not simply and not only, but significantly because of her experience with psychedelics.
Mm.
And I've been following her story for 10 years now.
Wow.
So they can be very powerful agents. And to get to know yourself, to actually uncover what you've been carrying, what you've been running away from, the pain that you haven't acknowledged, the joy that you haven't felt, you
Yeah,
know? No, they don't, it doesn't stop there, because you can have these experiences, but if you don't integrate them into your life, they just become memories.
of course. Of course.
But they can open doors.
Of course. I almost feel like it almost brings me like back into my body.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's something that's really impactful with the trauma. But again, if you don't integrate it, you can so quickly come back out of your body from it.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's my personal experience, actually.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I don't tell this story in the book, but once I led a retreat with ayahuasca, maybe 10 years ago. And when I'm with the plant, I'm very grounded and rather wise and present and all that. So I thought, oh my God, I finally achieved guru status. And then, and the next day I come back to Vancouver, and this time my wife is there to pick me up, and she's just had a new haircut, and I couldn't stand it. And my life just fell apart. So so there's because I need to be attracted to her, and if I'm not, then I just feel terrible. I'm just got a little baby. So there's the guru, with unintegrated psychedelic experiences. So you really got to integrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So so funny. So what would you say for like whether our community members or anybody listening who wants to try psychedelics or wants to experience this, what are the steps that they take? How can they do it safely? What do you suggest?
Well, first of all, it's illegal in the United States and Canada.
Sure.
The only one that's vaguely legal is ketamine.
Mhm.
Um, I not for a minute think it's the best modality, but
Mhm.
it's the one that is available. So there are clinics that, you
Okay.
know, so if you find a clinic that's uses ketamine and is trauma informed,
That's important. Okay.
you know, then you're in pretty good shape.
Okay.
Um, Other modalities like MDMA are being researched now, and there's every hope on the part of the scientists and the organizers that within 2 or 3 years they'll be legalized for PTSD.
Mhm.
But of course, since every mental health condition is a result of trauma and complex, post-traumatic stress, it's stupid to restrict it to only
Right.
uh, one particular diagnosis. But that's how the system works. Then there's mushrooms that I'm telling you can be very powerful healing agents in the right hands, in the right context, in
Mhm.
safety, with
Right.
guides who are experienced. Um, so people can, it's an underground thing,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, I happen to know who to call and so on, and but
Right.
I've been in this world for a while. So it's not always easy to find somebody who's ethical
Yeah.
and experienced, and
You
uh,
think
and
we have some hope for that changing in the nearer future?
well, if you look at Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, the immense success that it's had, and he's got currently a Netflix series on the same subject. There's
Mhm.
certainly broad public interest. And I talked to Michael and I said, were you surprised by the reception of your book? And he said, it's particularly from the medical profession, he says, because I expected a lot of pushback. But he
Mhm.
says they realize how thin their toolkit is.
Mm.
So because the medical toolkit, when it comes to chronic health conditions, is really so thin,
Yeah.
that the best we can do with most mental health conditions or physical chronic conditions is to suppress symptoms,
Mhm.
but not to actually come to healing. I
Yeah.
think there's a pretty good chance that within the foreseeable future, but it's going to take, again, a decade or two,
Yeah.
that until these modalities, ayahuasca is another one I worked with that extensively. it's going to take a long time because these things are ayahuasca. It's hard to study it in a double blind, you know,
Yeah.
scientific fashion. Yet I don't need to study it. I've seen it
You've experienced it.
hundreds of times. I don't need to stitch more research about it. So now ayahuasca people can go and experience in other countries where it's legal.
Right.
And there are people in the States who do it as well, but they're underground. So how do you find these places? Well, you have to do a lot of research, a lot of due diligence, and you have to get lucky as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully in the future, it is a little bit easier to allow, and at least there is something like ketamine that is an option. I haven't experienced ketamine, but I have gone the shroom pathway, which has been very, very, very helpful in, again, bringing me back to my body and breaking, even when I did EMDR, which was so harmful to me, I actually had to like microdose to get myself out of the like permanent emotional flashback. It felt like it put me in for like
so the EMDR must have triggered your trauma.
It was really, really bad. The way that I kind of look at it is like, I've done a lot of work on a mental level. Like I've written all about every single one of my traumas. I've gone to therapy and so I've done a lot of work on the mental level with trauma. But when it came to EMDR, it felt like I haven't done as much on like the emotional level of my body and on the body level. So it felt like, well, I saw how it was helping and I was like re-looking at the experience differently. It felt like it was taking a knife to my emotional body and just stabbing it all over the place and then leaving me to just deal with it. And it brought me back into like suicidal aspects and just complete depression for a solid 6 months. I had to stop doing it. And I really had to, none of the tools that I usually work, like breath work or tapping, worked. The microdosing really was the only thing that got me out of that dark hole that it brought me into. And
what did you microdose with? Mushrooms or what?
With mushrooms, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But EMDR works great for my sister. So again, it works for some it doesn't. So it just depends.
What might be interesting for you sometime, not that you need to, but to have a conversation with somebody really well versed in the EMDR and discuss your experience with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they might actually be able to throw not that you should do it again, for God's sakes. But
my gut says absolutely not. So I'm gonna listen.
No.
To that.
And I've done it, and it's like did nothing for me, But then I have a very tough skull, but just to get some sense of that experience,
definitely,
I think that might be helpful sometimes to have a conversation with somebody.
Absolutely. And two, for the, just the community as well. I know a lot of people have tried it and it has worked, and other people it hasn't. So I think it's just all about bringing all of it to awareness so everybody can make their own choice about what's best for them in their healing, instead of this one size fits all concept